Okay, Bruce here again with Skeptical Guitarist Publications. Fingerstyle guitar is my favorite thing to do, and I wrote a book about it. And I'd like to bring you through this introductory book, Fingerstyle Guitar From Scratch. I'm going to assume that you already have a lot of chord knowledge and you've been strumming for some time, and so that these are basic chords. They're not really hard chords, but I do assume that you know an E minor and a G and a C and things like that. Okay, so this is about using the right hand in an organized fashion to play, rather than strumming all strings at once. We play what they call arpeggios. Arpeggio means harp-like, and so you play one note at a time. Sometimes you'll pair notes together. The point that we need to make, I think the strongest, is that you sort of want to maximize. A lot of people will start doing finger picking and they use one or two fingers, maybe just one finger. And really, the more fingers that you've got going, the better off you're going to be. It's a team effort. So think of, you have it'll pretty much be thumb, index, middle, and ring finger of the right hand. Left hand is just chords, okay? And most people want to sort of avoid using the third finger, and some people want to avoid using the second finger as well. The more you use, the better off you are. So we're going to deploy these fingers in what I call the overlapping tier system, T-I-E-R, different levels, right? So I want to use my thumb, index, middle, and ring, pinky not so much. Every once in a while it gets thrown in. In the book, they are abbreviated P for pulgar, for thumb, I for the index finger, indice, M for medio, middle finger, and A for the ring finger, annular is a ring finger, and that'll be the notation that I'll use in the book. So, I would say that there are two most common tiers of strings, and those would be index on the third string, middle on second, ring on first. That, I call it the higher tier. It's called higher because of pitch, not because of distance from the center of the earth, right? These are the higher notes. So that's the higher tier. But if I take these three fingers, the I, M, and the A, and I move them so the index finger is now stationed on the fourth string, that puts the middle finger on the third and the ring finger on the second. So these constitute the lower tier. So you have the higher tier of strings 3, 2, and 1, and the lower tier strings 4, 3, and 2. You really want to, unless there's some special reason, you really want to play adjacent fingers on adjacent strings. That's going to be our rule. Now, so, yeah, there's also kind of a lower tier. You can go index on 5, 4, 3, and you can do that as well. But now we're moving into the realm of the thumb. The thumb is generally in charge, well, it's always in charge of the sixth string and the fifth string. Now the fourth string, again, if it's a lower tier, index is stationed on the fourth string, so the fourth string is kind of the swing string. It's a bass. It can be used as a bass, but it can also be used as part of this higher trebly sound that you've got going with your arpeggio finger. So the thumb is one unit. I think of the fingers as being another unit, a different unit. And the way it works is that you'll use your thumb on the sixth and the fifth strings, and maybe the fourth, sometimes on the fourth. And the fingers will be on the higher tier, strings 1, 2, 3, or the lower tier, strings 2, 3, 4, but think of them as being independent units. Unit thumb, unit fingers. Because, for example, on page 6, for the E minor chord, I'll hold down an E minor chord, hold it, it doesn't matter how you finger it, and I'll say the thumb belongs on the sixth string. I can play a sixth string bass and a higher tier finger. So I can go, that's very pretty. Okay, but I can also keep the thumb on the sixth string and play the lower tier of strings. So that sounds like this. I'd say 9 times out of 10 you are either on the higher tier or you're on the lower tier with the fingers. Now, interestingly, the E minor happens to have a sixth string bass. A chord like A minor has a fifth string bass. Well, you change the thumb to the fifth string, but you don't change necessarily change the tier that the fingers are. I can play a fifth string bass, an A minor chord. I can play a fifth string bass and higher tier. So I can play that strings 5, 3, 2, 1. Or I can play a fifth string bass and a lower tier. So you've got these different combinations of bass and tier that you can play. That's the main thing I want to get across. That's really important for anything else that we do. So what I want to do is I'm just going to move on to page 8, and there's some really nice chord sequences. Maybe I should mention before is that in finger picking, if you're not going to pick, if you're strumming, you pretty much have to have all the strings either covered, fretted, or they're open, or they're muted, or whatever. But with finger picking, you don't really have to hold down all the notes in the chord if you're not going to play all the strings. So if I'm playing a C chord and I'm in the upper tier, okay, so C chord is a fifth string root, there's my thumb, and then I have index, middle, and ring on the higher tier, upper tier, whatever. This middle finger over here in the C chord, it's not being used. And there are two different, philosophies. The classical player would say, well, I just wouldn't put that finger down because I'm not going to use it. The folk player says, yeah, I'm going to keep it down, partly because it makes it look more like a C chord that I know. I'm very comfortable just slapping a C chord down. That's great. But the other thing is that in folk playing, you're more likely to improvise and vary the strings that you're playing. So you might want to keep it there in case you decide, or in case you accidentally hit that string, that fourth string. So that's just different, difference in philosophy. Technically, I could play this C chord with the middle finger, and on page 8 I do show, I tip the hat in the classical direction to say, look, you don't need all the fingers if you're not going to play all the strings. So here's the progression, and I'll play it with just the fingers that are needed. This is going to be, we call this Arpeggio 1. Thumb, index, middle, ring, P-I-M-A. Here's the chord progression. That was you notice that the C chord moved down through the bass notes, C to a B to an A, and at that point it shifted over. So I had a fifth string bass for the first 3 chords, and then for the rest of it was all in the sixth string. But the tiers didn't change. I kept the higher tier. Now, let's do that progression again, but now I'm shifting to the lower tier. Well, now, for example, on the C chord, I need to hold down that fourth string note. So let's just run through them here. They'll look a little bit differently. Again, you could have held the entire chord down the whole time. Sometimes when the chords get more complicated, you don't want to do that. You need extra fingers for other things. But so this time you'll see that we'll be adding more notes in the chord. So 1. Sixth string. Okay, so that's a general introduction to the tier concept, the overlapping tiers, and the independent bass. I'll skip ahead and run through an example, a little more complicated example of that same thing. Looks like this. This will be all lower tier, and the bass will change between 5th and 6th string. So you have to yesterday. If you did it in the key of C, that's what you come up with. So that's more like the kind of progression that you're going to run into. Page 21, I want to show a little bit of picking in a different meter, 3/4 time, as opposed to 4/4 time. So before we had 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now we're going to have 1 and 2 and 3 and. So what's happening here is the arpeggio starts off like the other arpeggio number 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, but then it comes back to the lower and yet lower string to give us 6 notes or 3 counts. We have 1 and 2 and 3 and. So for example, Morning Has Broken would have So that was an example of it's exclusively in the upper tier, and the bass is changing from the 5th, from the 6th to 5th, and also the 4th. You had the D7 chord. For the D7 chord, of course, there's only one tier the fingers can be in, the upper tier, because the thumb occupies the 4th string, so the index finger has to be on the 3rd string. Okay. I'd like to now just sort of review the first 20 arpeggios in the book. I would say, it's nice to know about these, but really, when you're just getting started, just pick 1 or 2 that you like and stick with those. But this is just a look ahead, and there are examples in the book that run through all of these patterns, so you can try them with different chords. I'm just going to take the C chord and just run through these. So number 1, that was arpeggio number 1. Number 2, we're flipping around the ring in the middle finger. Arpeggio 3 is the one that's in 3/4. Number 4, then use the ring finger. Twins, the ring and middle finger. Here's more of a, number 6 is more of a downward moving, descending line. 7 is a pinch pattern where thumb and middle finger come together at the same time. There's the pinch effect, and then the index finger comes in on the offbeat. Number 8 has the ring finger in the lead, and it's descending, and then winds up coming up a little bit. Number 9 is sort of flipped around, same thing, but index and middle finger are flipped around. Then again, there's a pinch with the ring finger, and then an ascending arpeggio. Number 11, you actually twin the ring and middle finger, and then do the same thing, really the same thing as arpeggio number 1, except it's got that pinch at the beginning. Number 12 has a pinch with the middle finger, index. Number 13 has the twin of the twinning of the first and second fingers. 14 is a longer pattern. Watch this. Number 15 is related, but listen to this slight difference. Number 16 again, slightly different. Of those last 3, you would probably pick 1 and just make that one your favorite. You wouldn't necessarily have to keep track of all of them. How about this one, number 17? Gets a bass back in there. And it's possible, number 18 shows you where you go, you can add the pinky and have, let me try it again. It's not a common thing. Feels odd. Number 19 is different rhythm. It's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And the last one is the same thing, except we're going to twin the middle and ring fingers. So we have, that's pretty complicated. Okay, now, I want to just introduce you to Travis style picking. Travis picking has The thumb in this case is really more, it's more involved. It takes a stronger role. It's not just in the regular arpeggios that we're looking at, the thumb is kind of just another finger. But here it sort of grabs the reins and actually keeps a very strong function. So for example, with a C chord, Travis speaking, it's also known as alternating bass. The thumb is keeping a beat like the left hand of a piano would, in like a ragtime type of piece, or like a boom chick in a country kind of sound. So that's maintained while the other, mostly the index and ring finger. You can also, index and middle. You can also add the ring finger, but for now let's just stick with the first two fingers. You'd have in between those bass notes, we'll stick these treble notes. So it's going to sound like this. You have the 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and this is on page 45. And it shows you how to build up from just keeping a steady bass line to inserting these extra notes. It's a really good accompaniment style. Let me show you, let me run through a couple of chord progressions with it. Obviously you can go to an upper tier and lower tier. And the interesting thing is, I said that wrong, upper bass, lower bass. The tier stays the same. You always use the upper tier. It's always the first three strings, because the thumb is now in charge, definitely in charge, of the 6th, 5th, and 4th strings. So you really do need to keep the upper tier going and just index on 3, middle on 2. So that's what was happening there. Let me just play it again. It's more about the speed that you might do it at. Now, that's one approach. The other approach that I like would be to do the pinch on count 1. This is going to sound a little more like, well, Dust in the Wind is the best example. I've been teaching Dust in the Wind for years, and the way that sounds, just the pattern by itself, is this. So you still hear the thumb traveling 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're still putting fingers in between those notes, but the first note is a pinch. You've got the pinch with the middle finger on count 1, a little pause, 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and. This material starts to appear on page 59, and it brings you through how to sort of build this pattern up. I'll play you an example of of Dust in the Wind, the introduction to Dust in the Wind, and I do go over that in the book, how to get through all these chords. It's a great exercise for doing this Travis picking. So here's how that sounds. That was strictly 5/4, 5th string bass, but as you get into the song, you do travel to both 6th string basses and a 4th string bass. Let me play you the chords to the verse. 6th string, 4th, 5th. Chorus then goes like this, and this begins with a 6th string bass, 5th string, 6th string. So there's your introduction to the two major kinds of fingerstyle playing. Travis style really, it's a kind of an arpeggio. It's strictly anything that is a broken up chord is an arpeggio, but I find it's very different from these other arpeggios where the thumb is not as dominant. Travis picking, very dominant thumb. Okay, well there's your introduction. You can look in the comments below to see a link to my website. I have other books. In fact, I think the next video that we're going to record will be Travis style guitar from scratch. We've been doing Travis style, but the difference is that this next book will show you how to not just play the picking pattern to accompany your voice, but how to throw a melody on. So something like so that's the next step in evolution of the Travis picking style. So that'll be the next book, and thanks for watching, and see you soon.